The morning light filtered softly through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Benjamin Hard's loft, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. He sipped his green tea, the familiar aroma grounding him, while his eyes scanned the daily newspaper with casual interest. Yet the quiet routine was interrupted by the buzz of his phone. A client, an anxious voice on the other end, explained the situation in hurried tones. Arthur Belmont, a wealthy businessman and owner of one of New York's most prominent investment firms, had received a letter. It was not just any letter, it was a threat, carefully crafted, promising the exposure of a deeply hidden secret unless a substantial sum of money was delivered promptly. Belmont's voice trembled as he admitted that the stakes were high, and the consequences could ruin him. Benjamin listened intently, noting the subtle clues in Belmont's speech: hesitation, emphasis, fleeting inconsistencies. It was a puzzle, and every word, every pause, was a piece of evidence waiting to be interpreted. When the envelope was delivered to Benjamin later that morning, he examined it meticulously. The paper was of a high quality, slightly textured type, and the handwriting was precise yet unfamiliar. Each letter leaned slightly to the right, the pen strokes deliberate, almost ceremonious. The ink bore faint smudges, as if the writer had paused mid-thought. Benjamin's analytical mind immediately catalogued every detail. There was no urgency in the handwriting, yet the message screamed it. A contradiction, intentional or not, that might reveal the psychological profile of the sender. The note inside was brief but loaded: "Your secrets are known. The cost of silence is $2 million. Do not attempt to involve authorities. Time is measured in hours." Benjamin's eyes narrowed. The threat was direct and personal. The sender had knowledge of Belmont's private affairs, details that could only come from someone close to the company, or someone with exceptional resources. The specificity suggested planning, patience, and confidence that no one would suspect them until it was too late. He set the letter on the desk and studied it from multiple angles, under different lights, letting his mind dissect the handwriting, the spacing, the slight indentation on the paper from the writer's pen. Each element was a clue, each anomaly a potential key to identifying the culprit. Benjamin then began considering the psychological dimensions. The sender had chosen intimidation as a tool, understanding the victim's fears and vulnerabilities. The figure was methodical, manipulative, and willing to exploit the high stakes of the business world for personal gain. The detective felt a familiar thrill: this was no ordinary threat. It was a challenge, carefully designed to test both the victim and any investigator who might attempt to intervene. He contacted Belmont to set up a secure meeting. The detective needed more than fear and hearsay, he needed facts, context, and insight into those closest to the businessman. Benjamin's mind was already tracing potential suspects, examining office dynamics, personal relationships, and possible motives hidden behind polished facades. As the day unfolded, he received additional details from Belmont: recent disputes with partners, confidential transactions, and rumors that had circulated quietly within the firm. Benjamin noted everything, mentally cataloging patterns and contradictions. Each piece of information was a thread in the intricate web he would need to untangle. By evening, Benjamin had organized his initial strategy. The threat was immediate, yet calculated. The sender was confident, possibly overconfident. And like every puzzle he had faced before, this one required patience, precision, and an unwavering attention to the smallest details. Benjamin Hard poured another cup of green tea, allowed the faint taste to settle, and glanced once more at the threatening note. He knew the game had begun, and that every move from this moment would be critical. The city outside continued its indifferent rhythm, but within the walls of the loft, a new investigation had begun, a test of intellect, perception, and resolve. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, mind alert, and prepared to delve into a world where secrecy, greed, and fear intersected. Somewhere among the people closest to Belmont, the true architect of the threat waited, and Benjamin intended to find them before it was too late. The next morning, Benjamin Hard arrived at Belmont's headquarters, a sleek glass structure in downtown Manhattan that gleamed like a fortress of modern ambition. Inside, everything smelled of money and order: polished marble floors, hushed conversations, and the faint aroma of freshly brewed espresso. Arthur Belmont greeted him personally, his handshake firm but his eyes restless. He was a man used to control, yet fear had unsettled his composure. "Mr. Hard," he began, his voice low, "I don't know who could be behind this. My company has many enemies, but none who would dare something like this." Benjamin's gaze swept across the spacious office. Everything was perfectly arranged, but perfection often hides chaos. On the wall hung photographs of Belmont shaking hands with influential figures. Success attracts attention, and envy. "Let's start with what we know," Benjamin said calmly. "The letter. Who had access to the information mentioned in it?" Belmont hesitated. "Only a few. My assistant, my financial director, and one of the partners, David Ross. But they've all been with me for years." Benjamin noted the subtle emphasis on the last sentence, a defense born from doubt. He began examining the office. The envelope had been delivered by courier, according to Belmont's assistant. There were no fingerprints, no obvious markings, and security cameras had not captured the delivery. Whoever sent it knew how to avoid electronic surveillance. Benjamin asked to see the company's internal email logs. The IT department complied reluctantly, wary of his cold precision. Within minutes, Benjamin noticed several anomalies: unauthorized access attempts from an internal IP, disguised under layers of rerouting. Someone inside the company was probing its communication system, searching, perhaps, for leverage. He leaned closer to the monitor, eyes sharp. The timestamps matched the same hour the blackmail email was sent to Belmont's private inbox. Coincidence? He didn't believe in those. Later, Benjamin walked through the office, greeting employees, watching reactions, tone, posture. He noticed a young woman at the reception desk glance nervously at him before quickly averting her eyes. A simple instinct, or fear of being caught in something larger. He paused near the conference room, where two executives were whispering. Their conversation stopped the moment he entered. "Detective Hard," one of them said with forced politeness. "We've heard a lot about your work." "I'm sure you have," Benjamin replied evenly, his eyes scanning the room. "Tell me, gentlemen, how long have you known Mr. Belmont?" 10 years, said one. "Since the company's early days." "Then you must know everything about him," Benjamin replied, almost casually. "Including the kind of secret someone might pay to keep hidden." The silence that followed was palpable. The detective's words had pierced through the corporate politeness like a knife. He didn't need a confession, he needed discomfort. Discomfort always made people reveal more than they intended. Back in his car, Benjamin reviewed the day's findings. The culprit had to be someone with intimate knowledge of Belmont's business affairs and access to his private communications. But there was another layer, the emotional one. The letter carried a tone of personal resentment. This wasn't just about money. It was about power, humiliation, or revenge. That night, Benjamin returned to his loft, spreading copies of the letter, surveillance logs, and notes across his desk. Classical music played softly in the background, Chopin's Nocturne in B-flat minor, a melody he often turned to when he needed clarity. As he reread the blackmail letter under the warm lamplight, he noticed something he hadn't before, a faint indentation beneath the last line, almost invisible unless viewed from the right angle. He took out a pencil and lightly shaded across the surface. Letters began to appear. It was a name. Or rather, part of one. DAV. Benjamin froze, eyes narrowing. "David Ross," he whispered. The same name Belmont had mentioned among the trusted few. It was too early to conclude, but the pattern was forming. Either someone wanted to frame Ross, or Ross was much deeper in this game than anyone suspected. He leaned back, staring out into the Manhattan skyline. The city lights flickered like 1,000 secrets waiting to be uncovered. The detective's intuition told him this case was about to twist in ways no one expected. And the deeper he went, the closer he'd get to the truth, or to the danger hidden behind it. The next morning brought heavy clouds to Manhattan, the kind that seemed to press down on the city, muting its usual chaos. Benjamin Hard preferred such weather. It dulled the noise, made people uneasy, and when people were uneasy, they talked more than they should. He arrived at Belmont's office unannounced. The receptionist greeted him with a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Hard, Mr. Belmont is in a meeting," she said, almost relieved to hide behind that excuse. "That's fine," Benjamin replied calmly. "I'm not here for him today." He moved through the hallways with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged there. Each person he passed lowered their gaze, uncertain if they should acknowledge him. That was one of Benjamin's most useful tools, his presence alone unsettled liars. He started with the assistant, Claire Donovan. She was in her late 30s, sharp, organized, the kind of person who ran an empire from behind the scenes. Her desk was immaculate, but Benjamin noticed her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses. "You've been with Mr. Belmont for how long?" he asked. 8 years, she answered. "Since the company was small. I've seen everything, the successes, the failures, the compromises." "Compromises?" Benjamin echoed. She hesitated. "In business, everyone makes them." Benjamin's expression didn't change. "And sometimes those compromises come back to haunt you." Claire swallowed, her throat tightening. He knew she was hiding something, not necessarily guilt, but fear. Fear of becoming collateral damage in a storm she couldn't control. Next, Benjamin met with David Ross, the man whose name had appeared faintly etched beneath the blackmail note. Ross was tall, confident, charming in that effortless corporate way. His office overlooked Central Park, the kind of view reserved for those who believed they had earned it. "Mr. Hard," Ross said with a smooth smile. "Arthur told me you'd be digging around. I hope you're not planning to turn this place upside down." "Only if I have to," Benjamin replied, sitting down across from him. "You've known Mr. Belmont a long time." 12 years, Ross nodded. "We built this company together." Benjamin's gaze drifted to the framed photos on the desk, 2 men smiling at award ceremonies, a younger Ross and Belmont clinking glasses. The friendship looked genuine, but so did most illusions. "Tell me, Mr. Ross," Benjamin said, his tone casual but eyes sharp, "do you often leave handwritten notes for your partners?" Ross raised an eyebrow, the faintest flicker of surprise. "Not really." "Why?" "Just curious," Benjamin replied, leaning back. "Your handwriting is distinct." Ross chuckled, a bit too quickly. "Detective, you're reading too much into office paperwork." Benjamin didn't respond. He simply watched the man, his gestures, his breathing, the faint tightening of his jaw. People could lie with words, but never with micro-expressions. Something in Ross's demeanor changed at the mention of handwriting. Subtle, but real. When Benjamin left the office, he didn't head straight for the elevator. Instead, he stopped by the break room, where 2 junior employees were whispering. They froze when they saw him, but he motioned for them to continue. "You've heard about the letter, haven't you?" Benjamin said quietly. The younger of the 2 nodded nervously. "Everyone has. People say Mr. Belmont's in serious trouble. And some say," the other added, glancing around, "that someone inside helped make that trouble happen." Benjamin smiled faintly. "Rumors have a strange way of pointing toward the truth," he said. Later that evening, Benjamin met with Belmont in a dimly lit corner of a small jazz bar, one of the few places where the businessmen felt comfortable talking freely. "I don't believe it's random," Belmont said, stirring his drink. "Someone in my circle wants to destroy me." "Someone close always does," Benjamin replied, his tone distant. "And they rarely start with violence. They start with secrets." He pulled out a small notebook, jotting down the words Claire, Ross, and internal access. Then, underneath, he wrote one more name, unknown, the Watcher. Because Benjamin had begun to notice something else, someone was watching him. A black SUV had followed his car twice that day. He'd seen a silhouette in the window of a nearby building during his conversation with Ross. Whoever orchestrated this blackmail didn't just want money. They wanted to see how far Benjamin would go, or perhaps, how close he would get before being stopped. As he walked back through the cool Manhattan night, the city lights reflecting in puddles, Benjamin's mind pieced together the growing puzzle. There were too many eyes, too many coincidences. Someone inside the company had opened the door to a much darker game, and the detective had just stepped right into its center. Rain poured over the city that night, smearing neon lights across the slick streets of Manhattan. Inside his loft, Benjamin Hard sat surrounded by notes, photographs, and printouts, the fragments of a puzzle he was still assembling. The rhythmic tapping of rain against the windows mixed with the soft hum of Chopin's Nocturne No. 20 in C-sharp minor. It was his ritual: music, observation, silence. The letter lay on the desk, now encased in a plastic sleeve. Around it, enlarged scans, handwriting analyses, digital timestamps. Benjamin wasn't just reading a threat, he was reading a mind. He compared the curves of letters, the pressure of ink, the rhythm of phrasing. The writer was deliberate but emotional, control mixed with suppressed anger. Every word had been chosen carefully, but not without feeling. That alone told him something: this wasn't a professional extortionist. It was someone personal. Benjamin adjusted his glasses and opened his laptop. On the screen, rows of emails appeared, all filtered from Belmont's internal servers. Most were routine business messages. But amid the ocean of polite correspondence, certain phrases kept reappearing, always from different employees, always in subtle variations. The system is stable. Everything is under control. No reason for concern. At first glance, harmless. But Benjamin noticed the pattern. The phrasing was identical, the timing precise, every message sent within a 2-hour window every few days. It wasn't communication, it was signaling. He began mapping connections. Each message traced back to a different sender, but the underlying metadata pointed to one origin: a single computer on the 21st floor of Belmont Financial. The same floor where David Ross's office stood. Benjamin leaned back, a faint smile touching his lips. "So," he murmured, "you like to play games, Mr. Ross." But another possibility gnawed at him: what if Ross wasn't the author but the puppet? Someone could have planted the digital trail to frame him. In cases like these, certainty was the most dangerous illusion. The next day, Benjamin returned to the company under the guise of routine questioning. He walked through the hallways slowly, observing. A reflection in the glass caught his attention, a man watching him from a corridor corner. When Benjamin turned, the man vanished. He found Claire in the archive room, sorting documents. Her movements were hurried, nervous. "Rough morning?" he asked. She looked up, startled. "Just, trying to stay busy." He stepped closer, scanning the shelves behind her. "Do you know who has access to the financial archives?" "Only a few," she said quickly. "Myself, Mr. Ross, and the accounting department." Benjamin studied her face. "And Belmont?" She shook her head. "He rarely comes down here. Too many memories." "Memories?" Claire bit her lip. "His wife used to work here, before the accident." Benjamin froze. The detail struck him. "Accident? She died 5 years ago. Car crash. It nearly destroyed him." Benjamin made a mental note. Grief changes people, but it also exposes them. Secrets buried in the past often find their way into the present. Back in his loft that evening, Benjamin began building a new theory. He pinned photographs on a corkboard: Belmont, Ross, Claire, the blackmail letter, the anonymous emails. Red threads connected them: motives, opportunities, psychological pressure points. And there, in the center, he placed a new photo: Evelyn Belmont, Arthur's late wife. He dug into old public records, news articles, and financial archives. What he found was intriguing. Evelyn had once co-founded the company with Arthur and Ross, but her name had quietly disappeared from all official documents a year before her death. No press releases, no statements. Just silence. Benjamin stared at her photograph, a calm smile, eyes intelligent and kind. "You're still part of this, aren't you?" he murmured. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered, expecting silence. Instead, a distorted voice spoke. "Stop digging, Mr. Hard. Some ghosts deserve to stay buried." Then the line went dead. Benjamin sat in the dim light, the city roaring beyond the glass. His pulse didn't quicken, it rarely did. But for the first time since taking the case, he felt something different, not fear, but anticipation. The hidden patterns were no longer just in data or ink. They were in people, in the lies they told and the memories they tried to erase. And now, whoever was behind the blackmail knew that Benjamin Hard was getting close. He poured himself a cup of tea, calm as ever, and whispered into the quiet of his loft. "Let's see how deep your pattern goes." The morning after the phone call, Benjamin Hard left his loft earlier than usual. The city was still waking up, a gray mist hung low over Manhattan, muffling the sound of traffic. He preferred the city like this, half asleep, half honest. Lies sounded louder in silence. At Belmont Financial, tension was now a living thing. Employees whispered in corners, doors closed faster when he approached. Fear had begun to spread, and Benjamin knew that fear was the best ally a detective could have. It loosened tongues and cracked masks. He began with the IT department, requesting access to internal surveillance footage. The head technician, a pale young man named Evan, hesitated. "Some of the footage from last week is missing," he admitted. "Missing?" Benjamin repeated quietly. "Yes. 3 separate nights. Different cameras, all on the same floor. The 21st. Evan nodded. "Exactly." Benjamin leaned forward. "Someone wiped them manually. Show me who logged in during those hours." Evan hesitated before turning the screen toward him. The access logs displayed one familiar name, Claire Donovan. Benjamin frowned. Claire. The efficient assistant who had seemed more frightened than guilty. It didn't fit, not yet. Still, the evidence was clear. Either she was deeply involved, or someone was using her credentials. He found Claire in the cafeteria, sitting alone, staring into her untouched coffee. "You've had a long week," he said, sitting across from her. She looked up, startled. "Mr. Hard. I didn't expect you." "You were logged into the security system 3 nights in a row," he said plainly. Her lips parted. "What? That's impossible. I was home. Alone." Benjamin interrupted softly. She blinked. "Yes. Then you have no alibi," he said, his tone neutral. "But I don't think you did it." She looked at him, confused. "Then why?" "Because you don't fit the handwriting," he replied. "And because you're too frightened. The guilty are rarely that scared, they're defensive, not broken." Tears welled in her eyes. "Someone's trying to ruin me," she whispered. Benjamin stood, his gaze thoughtful. "Then you're not the target," he said. "You're the distraction." He left her there, shaken but silent, and stepped outside for a moment of air. The clouds had darkened. The air smelled like rain and asphalt, the scent of truth about to break. That afternoon, Benjamin met Arthur Belmont in his office. The businessman looked exhausted, his confidence unraveling. "This thing is spreading," Belmont muttered. "Ross is threatening to resign. Investors are calling. I'm losing everything." Benjamin watched him closely. "Losing control, maybe. Not everything." Belmont glared at him. "Do you even understand what's at stake here, Hard. Benjamin's voice remained calm. I understand that fear makes people predictable. And someone is using that to their advantage. He pulled out a photograph, the faint indentation from the letter showing DAV, and laid it on the desk. If Ross isn't behind this, then whoever is wanted you to believe he was. Belmont frowned. You think someone's framing him? I think someone's framing everyone, Benjamin said. You, Ross, Claire, all connected, all compromised. The question isn't who did it. It's who benefits. As he left the office, his phone buzzed again. A message, untraceable. You're chasing shadows, detective. Keep running in circles, it suits you. Attached was a photograph. A blurry shot taken through his loft window. Benjamin standing by his desk, unaware he was being watched. He stared at the image for a long moment, his pulse steady but his thoughts sharpening. Someone had been inside his world, his sanctuary. They weren't just targeting Belmont, they were targeting him. That night, Benjamin reviewed every step of the case. The letters, the missing footage, the false trails. He began to see the design, a layered structure of deception, where every clue served a dual purpose, to reveal and to mislead. Ross's guilt now looked too obvious. Claire's fear, too convenient. Even Belmont's panic, perhaps, too rehearsed. Benjamin poured himself a cup of green tea and sat at the piano, letting his fingers trace a slow, thoughtful melody. Music helped him think, and thinking was his weapon. Somewhere in the rhythm of notes, he found clarity. He stopped mid-chord, his eyes opening with quiet realization. Whoever's behind this, he murmured, doesn't want money. They want control. He looked at the board again, faces, letters, data, and drew a new line connecting two names, Evelyn Belmont and David Ross. Not random, he whispered. Never was. Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline. The false leads had served their purpose, to confuse, to distract, to delay. But now Benjamin Hard had begun to see through the fog. And someone, somewhere in the shadows, knew that their carefully built illusion was starting to crumble. The rain hadn't stopped all night. By morning, Manhattan was washed in silver, a city of reflections and distortions. Benjamin Hard sat by his window, a mug of untouched coffee cooling beside him. The photograph from last night still lay on his desk. He turned it over. Nothing on the back. No signature, no smudge, just silence. Whoever took it was deliberate. At 8 a.m., his phone rang. Benjamin Hard, a calm voice asked. This is Detective O'Neill, NYPD. We have something you'll want to see. 2 hours later, Benjamin stood beneath the harsh lights of the precinct's evidence room. On the metal table lay a small black flash drive sealed in a plastic bag. Anonymous drop-off, O'Neill said. Came in with your name on it. Benjamin raised an eyebrow. And you didn't open it? O'Neill smirked. I'm old-fashioned. I like to keep my job. Benjamin plugged the drive into the nearby computer. The screen flickered to life, revealing grainy footage, an office hallway, time-stamped 2 nights ago. Belmont Financial. The 21st floor. He watched in silence as a masked figure entered the frame, moving with precision. The figure stopped near a door labeled Executive Office, D. Ross. Then, they pulled a small envelope from their coat pocket and slipped it under the door. A few seconds later, the camera glitched, static, then resumed. A faint reflection on a polished surface revealed a clue, the edge of a silver bracelet on the intruder's wrist. Benjamin froze the frame. Zoomed in. The bracelet bore a tiny engraving, the initials EB. Evelyn Belmont, he said quietly. O'Neill frowned. You're saying the boss's wife broke into the office? Benjamin didn't answer. I'm saying someone wants us to think she did. He left the precinct uneasy. Someone was feeding him clues, just enough truth to make the lies convincing. Back at Belmont Financial, Arthur Belmont was waiting, tension twisting his face. "Hard, you have to stop this," he said, voice trembling. "My wife had nothing to do with it." Benjamin set the photo on the desk. "Someone thinks she does. Or wants me to believe she does." Belmont rubbed his temples. "You don't understand. Evelyn's unstable lately. The stress, the rumors, it's taking a toll." Benjamin watched him carefully. "Rumors about what?" Belmont hesitated. "About her and Ross." That single sentence shifted the air. The motive, the tension, everything clicked into sharper focus. Benjamin leaned forward. "You're telling me your wife and your vice president were having an affair?" Belmont's silence was answer enough. Outside, thunder rumbled, a low growl of the storm returning. "You think Ross is blackmailing you?" Benjamin asked. Belmont shook his head weakly. He wouldn't dare. But Benjamin saw the fear behind his denial. Later that evening, Benjamin returned to his loft. He placed the flash drive beside the photograph. 2 warnings, both anonymous, both too convenient. He poured a drink, though he didn't touch it, and mapped the timeline. The letters began a month ago. The footage was wiped the week after. Now, a new video implicating Evelyn. Each move came right after Benjamin uncovered the previous one, as if someone were responding in real time. He paused. Someone was watching him. He turned off the lights, leaving only the city glow through the blinds. Then he sat silently, waiting. Minutes stretched into an hour. Then, from across the street, a faint red glimmer. A camera lens. Watching. Benjamin smiled faintly. "Got you." He grabbed his coat, slipped out through the back exit, and crossed the alleyway in darkness. The opposite building was abandoned, once a print shop, now decaying. He climbed the fire escape, moving soundlessly. At the top floor, he found it, a small surveillance setup, a tripod, a camera, and a laptop linked to a remote network. Whoever operated it had vanished minutes earlier. But they'd left one thing behind, a note taped to the laptop screen. "Curiosity kills more than cats, detective." Benjamin pocketed the note. The cables were still worn, whoever was here had been close. He returned home, more determined than ever. The hunter was being hunted. That night, he wrote on his board. "Someone inside Belmont Financial is orchestrating this, and they're not done yet." He added one more thought. "This isn't about money. It's about power, and guilt." Outside, lightning split the sky. The storm had returned. And so had Benjamin's resolve. Morning crept into the city like a reluctant guest. The storm had passed, but Manhattan still wore its gray coat of mist. Benjamin Hard sat at his piano, fingers barely touching the keys. A quiet, uneasy melody filled the loft, something between thought and intuition. He stopped mid-note. His board stared back at him, covered in photographs, names, and question marks. Evelyn Belmont. Daniel Ross. Arthur Belmont. The triangle was obvious, but the motive still wasn't. He knew one thing, whoever orchestrated this wasn't after money. It was personal. At 9 sharp, Benjamin walked into Belmont Financial. The tension in the building was almost tangible. Conversations halted when he entered, even the elevator seemed to hum in discomfort. He went straight to the HR office, where a young assistant named Clara Jennings greeted him nervously. "You said you wanted to see the employee records, Mr. Hard." "Yes. Specifically those who had access to the executive floor surveillance system." She hesitated. "That would be Daniel Ross and me. I handle the digital archiving." Benjamin's eyes sharpened. "You?" Clara swallowed hard. "Just for backups. I don't change or delete anything." He studied her face, genuine fear, trembling hands, but no deceit. She was scared, yes, but not guilty. Thank you, Ms. Jennings. That'll be all. As he left, Benjamin's phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. Stop digging, detective. Or I'll bury you in the same grave as the truth. Attached was a photo, Benjamin's own loft window, taken just minutes ago. He froze. Someone was watching him again, even after he'd destroyed the camera setup last night. He called Detective O'Neill. Can you trace a message sent from a masked number? Not without a warrant, O'Neill replied. But send it anyway. I'll see what I can do. Benjamin didn't wait. He had no time for bureaucracy. Instead, he followed his instincts, and they led him to Evelyn Belmont. She opened the door to her Upper East Side apartment in silence. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were red, the kind of red that comes from too many sleepless nights. Mr. Hard, she said softly. I was wondering when you'd come. Inside, her home was an elegant museum, art, crystal, perfection. But beneath the order, Benjamin sensed chaos. You're being accused of sneaking into your husband's office, he said bluntly. She laughed, bitter and tired. Arthur told you that, didn't he? I suppose Daniel Ross was the one who showed him the footage. Benjamin didn't answer. You knew about the letters? Evelyn nodded slowly. Of course. They were meant for me, not Arthur. That revelation caught him off guard. For you. She walked to the window, her silhouette framed by the pale morning light. He thinks someone's blackmailing him for corporate secrets. But they're not. They're blackmailing me, for something that happened 12 years ago. Benjamin's expression hardened. 12 years. Evelyn turned. Her voice trembled for the first time. I wasn't always Evelyn Belmont. Before I married Arthur, I worked in Chicago. There was a man, a scandal that was covered up. Someone died because of it. The police never found out, but someone did. And now they want to make me pay. Benjamin processed her words quickly. You think Ross knows? She looked away. He was the only one I ever told. The puzzle was reshaping itself. This wasn't corporate blackmail, it was revenge. Benjamin stood. You'll need to tell your husband everything. If the blackmailer wants you cornered, honesty is your only defense. Evelyn's voice cracked. You don't understand. If Arthur learns the truth, I'll lose everything. Benjamin's tone softened. If you don't, you'll lose much more. He left her apartment deep in thought. Outside, the fog had begun to lift, revealing a cold blue sky. The city was waking up, indifferent to the secrets it contained. As Benjamin walked toward his car, he noticed a reflection in a nearby window, a man in a gray cap, watching him. When Benjamin turned, the man vanished into the crowd. He approached the spot, scanning the pavement. A faint smell of tobacco lingered, the same brand from the cigarette stubs found near the surveillance site. Benjamin smiled grimly. So, we've met before. Back at his loft, he pinned a new note on the board. Target, Evelyn. Motive, old sin. Operator, inside Belmont. Watcher, still active. The web was tightening, and for the first time, Benjamin felt that the enemy wasn't just clever, they were enjoying this. He sat down, poured a fresh cup of tea, and murmured under his breath. Let's see how far you're willing to go. By the next morning, Benjamin Hard was already in motion. He boarded the first flight to Chicago, the city where Evelyn's previous life had taken place. If there were answers, they were buried there. The sky over Illinois was pale and lifeless. A cold wind swept through the airport as he stepped outside. Chicago smelled of steel and rain, a city that remembered everything. Benjamin's first stop was the Tribune archives. Within hours, he found it, a short article from 12 years ago, dated March 6, 2013. Local tech consultant found dead in apartment fire. Police rule accidental cause. The victim's name, Michael Doran. Benjamin stared at the small, grainy photo of a man in his 30s, intelligent eyes, calm face. The report was brief, but one detail stood out: the fire had started in his office, electrical failure, no evidence of foul play. He read the name of the company, Doran and Associates, a consulting firm specializing in corporate data recovery. A small firm, but one that had worked with some very big clients, including Belmont Technologies. Interesting, Benjamin murmured. At the Chicago Police Department, he managed to access the old case file under a consultant's pretext. Most evidence had been archived, but there was a note in the detective's handwriting. Unconfirmed witness reports: woman seen leaving the scene 15 minutes before the fire. No identification. Benjamin felt the pieces start to move. He didn't need confirmation. That woman was Evelyn. He found the detective who'd written the note, Mark Tierney, retired now, living in a quiet suburb outside the city. Tierney was in his 70s, but his mind was sharp. "I remember that case," he said, pouring coffee. "Strange one. The guy, Doran, decent fella. Rumor was he found something he shouldn't have. Next thing, his office burns, files gone, and poof, case closed." Benjamin leaned forward. "Something he found. About who?" Tierney gave a tired smile. "That's the million-dollar question. A woman came to me later, said she worked with Doran, begged me to reopen it. Never saw her again." "Did she leave a name?" He shook his head. "But she left this." Tierney disappeared into a back room and returned with a worn-out envelope. Inside, a photograph. Benjamin studied it. A group of 6 people at a company party. Among them, unmistakably, Evelyn Belmont, younger, with darker hair, standing next to Michael Doran. Behind them stood a man Benjamin didn't recognize, tall, sharp-featured, wearing the same silver bracelet he'd seen in the surveillance footage. The initials on that bracelet, EB. Benjamin froze. The letters hadn't stood for Evelyn Belmont. They stood for Edward Brooks, the man in the photo. "Who's that?" Benjamin asked. Tierney squinted. "Brooks. Worked security for Doran's firm. Disappeared after the fire." Benjamin's pulse quickened. "Do you know if he's alive?" "Never found the body. But rumor was, he changed his name, moved east." "New York?" Tierney nodded slowly. The flight back felt endless. Benjamin stared out the window as the city lights of New York grew beneath him like veins of gold. The truth was emerging, twisted and human. Back in his loft, he laid the new photograph beside all the others. The picture told a story on its own. Doran had discovered something dangerous, Brooks had been involved, and Evelyn had escaped, leaving both behind. Then the letters began 12 years later. Someone had waited a long time to strike. His phone buzzed again. Another message. "You shouldn't have gone digging, Benjamin. Some ghosts don't like to be found." This time, there was a second attachment, a video. Benjamin hesitated, then pressed play. It was Evelyn. Sitting in her car, terrified, hands gripping the steering wheel. Someone was filming her from a distance. He froze the frame and enhanced the reflection in the rearview mirror, the same gray cap, the same watcher. Benjamin whispered to himself, "Edward Brooks. He's alive." The realization came with a cold, clinical clarity. The blackmailer wasn't just anyone, it was the man who'd faked his death, resurfaced years later, and was now punishing everyone he blamed for his downfall. But there was something else. Benjamin replayed the video and noticed a faint hum, background noise. Not traffic. Machinery. Industrial. He smiled grimly. "You made a mistake, Edward." He opened his notebook and wrote 3 words. Old power plant. He knew where to find him. The old power plant on the edge of Brooklyn was a skeleton of its former self, vast, hollow, humming with forgotten electricity. The air smelled of rust and damp concrete. Benjamin Hart's footsteps echoed as he entered through a broken side door, flashlight slicing through the darkness. The hum he'd heard in the video was unmistakable, the rhythmic pulse of the plant's old turbines, still faintly alive. He followed the sound deeper inside. Every sense was alert, every instinct sharp. Someone had been here recently, footprints in the dust, cigarette ash on the floor, the faint warmth of a recently extinguished light. Then he saw it, a small desk in the center of the hall, lit by a single hanging bulb. On the desk, a laptop, an envelope, and a lit cigar burning in an ashtray. "Welcome, Mr. Hard," came a voice from above. Benjamin turned slowly. Edward Brooks stood on the metal catwalk above him, older than in the photograph, his face leaner, colder, with eyes that carried 12 years of silence. "I was wondering when you'd find me," Brooks said, descending the stairs. "You always were the persistent type." Benjamin stayed calm. Persistence is a side effect of curiosity. Brooks smiled. "And curiosity kills." They stood across from each other, predator and detective, both reading the other. "You've been busy," Benjamin said. "Letters, surveillance, threats. You planned this well." Brooks chuckled. 12 years gives a man time to plan. When you're left for dead in a fire started by your own colleagues, revenge becomes organized. Benjamin's expression didn't change. "You think Evelyn set that fire?" "I don't think," Brooks snapped. "I know. She and Doran tried to erase me. I found proof of their embezzlement, and they burned the office to bury it. Only Doran didn't make it out." He paced slowly, his voice echoing off the walls. "She married Belmont. Built a new life. Money. Power. Respect. While I lived in the shadows, rebuilding from nothing." Benjamin studied him. "So the blackmail was never about money?" Brooks smirked. "Of course not. I wanted them to feel what I felt, fear. Loss. Exposure." Benjamin nodded slightly. "You wanted justice, but you settled for vengeance." Brooks tilted his head. "Is there a difference?" Benjamin took a step closer. "There is. One ends with peace. The other ends with you." The silence that followed was heavy. Then Brooks raised a small remote control. "Do you know what this is?" Benjamin's eyes narrowed. Brooks smiled faintly. "Insurance. There are explosives wired to the generator. One press, and this place, and you, disappear." Benjamin's tone was steady. "That's not your style. You don't want to vanish. You want to be seen." For a split second, something flickered in Brooks's expression, hesitation. Benjamin seized it. "You didn't plan on killing her, did you? You wanted her to confess. You wanted Belmont to know. That's why you sent the video to me, to make me bring the truth to light." Brooks's jaw tightened. "You're good, detective. But you're predictable," Benjamin replied. He reached into his coat, slowly, deliberately, and tossed a small object onto the table. A recording device. The light blinked red. "I've been recording since I walked in." Brooks's smirk faded. "Everything you just said," Benjamin continued, "is enough to bury you without the explosives." Brooks exhaled through his nose, lowering the remote. "You think I care about prison? You think I fear anything after 12 years of being dead?" "No," Benjamin said softly. "But you fear being forgotten." That hit its mark. Brooks's hand trembled slightly. He looked around, the empty factory, the silence, the echoes of his own voice, and suddenly it felt like a tomb. Benjamin stepped closer. "End it here, Edward. Walk out and tell your story. Or you'll vanish again, this time for real." Brooks's eyes filled with conflict. For a long moment, neither man moved. Then, slowly, he dropped the remote. It hit the concrete with a dull clatter. The sound was the end of 12 years. Outside, the first light of dawn began to seep through the cracked windows. Benjamin picked up the remote and turned toward the exit. "You did the right thing." Brooks gave a faint, broken laugh. "No. You did." When Benjamin reached the door, he turned back one last time. Brooks stood beneath the hanging bulb, shoulders sagging, a man who had finally stopped running from his own ghost. The detective walked into the morning light, sirens growing in the distance. The morning sun painted the skyline in gold and gray as Benjamin Hart stepped out of the old power plant. The sirens were louder now, echoing across the empty street. He didn't look back. Behind him, officers rushed in, their radios crackling with clipped commands. Edward Brooks had surrendered quietly. No resistance, no grand speech, just silence. When they let him out in handcuffs, his eyes met Benjamin's one last time. There was no hatred left, only exhaustion. Hours later, Benjamin sat in his office, the same small space that had become his refuge from the chaos of the city. On his desk lay the recording device, the one that had captured Brooks's confession. Next to it, the envelope Brooks had left on the table in the plant. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single page, an old photograph of 3 men, Brooks, Doran, and a young woman standing between them, Evelyn, smiling. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, were the words, "Once, we believed in something." Benjamin stared at it for a long moment before setting it down. The TV in the corner played a news report. Former financial officer Edward Brooks was arrested today after resurfacing 12 years following his presumed death in a fire. Sources say his confession exposed a network of corruption in the Belmont Group dating back over a decade. Benjamin muted the sound. The truth was out, the names, the crimes, the lies. But justice, as always, felt complicated. He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned back. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent, unaware of how close it had come to another quiet tragedy. His phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn Belmont. "Thank you for ending this. I don't know what else to say." Benjamin typed back slowly, "The truth always ends something, and begins something else." Then he hesitated and deleted it, leaving the message unsent. Instead, he opened his window. The cold air hit his face, clearing the lingering fog of the night. He thought of Brooks, of how pain had twisted a man's pursuit of justice into obsession. How easily truth could become a weapon. On his wall hung a framed quote from his mentor, one he'd nearly forgotten. "A detective's greatest challenge isn't solving the case. It's living with the answers." Benjamin smiled faintly. There was a knock at the door. Officer Ruiz, young, eager, new to the precinct, stepped inside, holding a folder. "Detective Hard. Captain says we've got another case. Missing person. Midtown." Benjamin glanced at the folder, then at the city outside. The sun had fully risen now, washing the streets in pale light. He took the file. "Let's go." As they left the office, the photograph on the desk caught a final glint of sunlight. The faces frozen in time, 3 friends, now ghosts of a past undone by greed and silence. Outside, the hum of traffic replaced the echo of the power plant. Life continued, indifferent but steady. Benjamin walked down the steps, coat collar turned up against the wind. Another day. Another mystery. Another chance to chase the truth, not for vengeance, not for glory, but for peace. And though he would never admit it aloud, Benjamin Hart carried a quiet hope, that someday, one of these cases might actually end with forgiveness. The city swallowed him again, a lone figure among millions, his shadow stretching long across the morning pavement. The fire was out. The story was over. But for Benjamin Hart, the silence was just the beginning.